but the process that I've described here is the mechanism behind the determination of the interest rate bid or the time preference element of the interest rate spread. Now, we all know there are two prices to any underlying good, the bid and the offer. The bond market is no different. This process here describes the time preference element. The other element is the productivity, the aspect of productivity, but I'm not going to go into that here. So the point about it is that you do all this, you know, it doesn't happen, you know, one by one. It's a continuous process, And what happens is that you create a system of assets, liabilities, this is the unusurped mechanism I'm describing here. So what happens is that from the process of this subjective determination of demand versus what is not needed on demand, you create a system of assets and liabilities. So the liabilities are defined by time deposits of varying maturities, and the corresponding asset is the silver bond. Now, this was all subjectively determined. The interaction was not predicated by rules as to what the bank needed to keep. So this system was perfectly stable. You know, the person who had their silver on demand deposit could have access to their silver because it was fully matched by cash silver sitting in the vaults of the bank. The person with a 1 month time deposit will have to wait 1 month before his 1 month bond liquidates into silver, and so on. But the point is the rotation of all of this, and you have to imagine it rotating, it's perfectly stable because it was subjectively determined at each stage. There was no interference from Switzerland or anywhere like that. So the determination of the proportion of any individual silver that is required on demand is purely subjective, and it's certainly not the prerogative of the storehouse owner. So again, you know, Mr. Wolf is misunderstanding the nature of what banking should be. The subjective determination of silver required on demand, coupled with the recursive procedure, gives rise to this. Okay? So is that all clear? Is this clear? Good. Now,
you're a little bit quick there. You said was it recursive?
Recursive. Recursive.
My limited understanding, does that mean they have recourse to their...
Oh, no. Recursive is just a description of the process. You know,
Okay.
If I determine what is required on demand versus not on demand, then I allow someone else to do that as well. So it's a kind of, it's a recursive procedure in the sense that, yeah.
So I'm a computer scientist by training. A recursive procedure is one that says you're going to divide the deposit into demand and time, and then call the procedure again and subdivide into another demand and time, and then take that time and divide that into demand and time, and keeps going until you finally get down to an infinitesimal amount. So it's a self-similar repeating process that repeats on itself. Does that make sense?
To a small degree. What you're effectively doing in that system is you're not borrowing short and lending long.
I haven't got to that yet.
You're matching your time
yes.
deposit and your time liability. So
exactly.
They're
exactly.
So a recursive process.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Basically, the result is that you end up with a system of. Now this is higher order money. They call it higher order money. You know, if you go up all the way up there, it will be M4 or something like that. You know, strictly it's not money, but it liquidates into money hopefully. You know, at some point. But the point is that what happened is economists saw that. They saw that you could multiply, inverted commas, the amount of cash silver to create all of these liabilities. And they said, well, instead of letting people to determine at each stage how much they want to be lent out versus how much they want, they'll say, well, just make it 10%. Okay, so if I come and deposit a demand deposit of cash silver into a bank, they will say, well, you only need to keep 10% of that. You can invest the rest in safe assets like government bonds and the like. You know, but is that clear? But the point is that it looks the same superficially. So they said, well, just keep 10%. Whereas at each stage, it's a subjective process. It could be 6% with one person, 5%, it could be 100% with another person.
So that decision, if I may ask the question, that decision to nominate 10% as the start of fractional reserve version of the process of banking.
Yeah. Now I don't like because it's quite obvious that this system is fractional. You know.
But
it's matched. Okay, and it's you know. Fraudulent fractionality would be this 10% thing. You know.
Sandy, could we assume that you, in a certain sense, sum up all the individual demands, 5%, 10, 20, 30, blah, 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 and it works out to 13.5%.
Yeah, and that's the number.
And that's the number, and then tomorrow it's not the same number again because stuff has changed.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. But the point is, Basel thinks it's perfectly okay to say, well, it can be 13% forever. You know.
No, I mean, first of all, like I say, I'm opposed to unnecessary government intervention, but doesn't having a set number give the government a degree of control over the money supply?
Yes.
So are you advocating letting the money supply go?
Sorry?
Are you, so under this system, are you letting the banking system control the money supply?
No. It's the person that controls the money supply, because it's the person at each stage that determines how much they want equivalently in their pocket on demand versus how much they don't want on.
So the money supply would be equal to our demand for money?
No.
A function of savings.
It's a function of savings, yeah. It's a function of subjective preference, that's all. Money is the consequence. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll get to that in a bit, because there's a bit more to go still. Okay, so I want to emphasize again that I haven't talked about it yet, but the concept of time deposit and bond is not dependent upon the existence of a literal storehouse. You don't actually need, you know, a storehouse there. It's purely a concept of the mind. Ex mensis. But obviously, if you wanted to sell a bond ahead of expiry, it's quite hard to sell a bond that just exists in your head. You know? A notarized bond is much easier to find a bid for than something that you just remember. So what happened was that we're forgetting about the temples now. The temples have been left to what they're meant to be doing. More and more storehouses, as it were, come in, and that has the effect of reducing the bid-offer spread, you know, between those that wish to borrow silver and those that wish to lend it. Now you should all be able to see how Dr. Wolf is obviously wrong in his assessment that the deposit base of 61 trillion doesn't match up with the cash value of gold at 1.3 trillion. Well, it was never bloody well meant to do that. Okay, I mean, look at the way the system originally formed. You don't compare the amount of cash silver to the amount of total liabilities and say, right, that means that silver has to be marked up 10 times or something because you're being fraudulent in some way. You know, the $61 trillion of deposits don't exist at the same duration. They exist at vastly differing durations. You know, it's not current. And for someone like Martin Wolf to make that mistake is quite shocking. You know, very, very shocking that he did. Okay, so we've destroyed Martin Wolf, and it was quite easy to see how to destroy him.
Who's next?
Who's next?
I've got